Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm kind of late to this party already, but better late than never, right? This is my honkaistarrail who needs reworks from every character list. I probably worded that very badly, but you probably get the concept of this video just by the title alone and what I have here on the screen. So, obviously, you already see here, highest priority. These characters need reworks immediately. Nowhere else to go. This is a very interesting spot for a character to be in, because even though they don't need buffs at the current moment, it seems like that in a few patches or so, there's really nowhere else to go than a rework. It feels imminent in a matter of time. Personal kit issues. These are units that have issues in their kit that would significantly benefit from a rework. Lacking teammates. This is for characters that are just lacking the proper teammates to work with. It's not exactly their kit that needs reworking, but rather some stuff from their teammates that don't work well. Doesn't need reworks. Obviously, the character doesn't need them, and they're pretty strong enough without them. And the I Wish tier, which is basically every 4-star and standard character in the game. Actually, let's might as well just throw it in here while we're at it. I think I got them all. Yeah, okay, I got all of them out of the way. Wait, I forgot about Sushang. Okay, there we go. Now, we're gonna be moving on to characters that actually have a lot of substance. And boy, are we starting off strong. Acheron. I think Acheron has nowhere else to go. In a few patches or so, I feel like she's in the rework chopping block. The thing is, I think Acheron is a very valuable character just because she has no team overlap. And because of the new game mode needing 3 teams, I actually think her value has gone up because of it. Her kit doesn't have a lot of mobility after this. It feels like in a couple of patches or so, she's gonna need the rework because she's very reliant on the Nihility units, and that's always been a thing. Nihility units are also reliant on her. But when you look at characters now like Cypher and Silverwolf, those units are not as dependent on Acheron as they are anymore, because Acheron is not proportionately stronger than those 2 units. So I think in a few patches or so, Acheron is gonna need some reworks. She doesn't need them now because honestly her value is still pretty high despite that. But with the way her kit is, I don't think there's anywhere else for her to go other than a rework down the line. Again, I'm not saying that Acheron is a bad character, it just feels like her design is now sort of trapped. Because now that her supports are actually getting stronger than her now, it feels like the supports are carrying Acheron instead of the other way around. Next, Aglaya. Obviously, she doesn't need it. She's a 3.x unit. Anaxa doesn't need it, obviously. Argenti. Argenti only really feels good in Pure Fiction, but there's a lot more options than Argenti that could work well. Like, if you want to run Argenti with Herta, Anaxa is oftentimes just a more valuable character outside of Pure Fiction, and inside of Pure Fiction, Herta is just better, the small Herta, and sometimes even Himiko is better. So in every role that Argenti sort of fills for your account, there's someone that just does it better. Like Jade, Himiko, Herta, Anaxa, it just doesn't feel nice to play him, and I think there really is nothing else you can do with this guy and just give him a rework. No amount of supports can save him at this point, and if it was gonna save Argenti, it would definitely save Herta more than Argenti will. Next, Aventurine. Aventurine is a very good sustain, and because of that, he's much better in terms of, future proofing and stuff like that. However, I think he's in personal kit issues. He's between these 2 tiers because Aventurine does not deal as much damage as the recent limited sustains that they put out. Lingsha and Hyacinth. Because Aventurine, it's kind of his kit's fault, but also it's his teammates' fault. Aventurine is a defense scaler, which means half of Robin's buffs just does not work on him. So it's half and half between these 2 issues. I think the game... Aventurine is fine right now, but I definitely think he could get buffs and it wouldn't break the game whatsoever because the damage from the other sustains already exist. So giving him more damage through, I don't know, maybe a defense scaling teammate or rework him so that attack doesn't become a useless stat on him would be a pretty good way to catch him up to 3.x units. He doesn't need it as much as, let's say, Acheron. There's still ways for him to go, obviously, but Aventurine can use that to scale up with the recent sustain units that are actually doing damage, like Lingshan Super Break and Hyacinth and HP scaling slash tribute teams. Next is Black Swan. Oh boy. I think Black Swan is either highest priority or nowhere else to go. And the only reason why I think that she's nowhere else to go is because High Sealance regenerates SP now. But even if you take away High Sealance from the equation, Black Swan's mechanics just aren't that good. It hasn't aged well to current content, and with High Sealance now existing, it's very much obvious that Black Swan is going to need a rework to catch up. Otherwise, a new DOT unit that is going to release will put her into the ground. So for now, she just has nowhere else to go. But after that DOT unit that's better than her releases, she will be at the highest priority. But yeah, she's with Acheron, fittingly. Blade, he just got buffed, so he doesn't really need it. Bootil. Bootil is weird. So Bootil has one of the highest damage ceilings in the game, and he can actually scale well with enemy HP because of his bleeds, and the fact that Fizz Break is just very strong. And even if you add toughness bars to the enemy, Fizz Break scales off the max toughness of enemies, which favors him actually. But here's the thing. Super Break is suffering the same way that DOT used to be. In the case that they don't get a lot of team members now. And to be honest, it feels like Super Break is such a complete archetype that I don't know if there's anything else for Bootil to do. I mean, to be honest, if it's a Super Break problem, not just Bootil. Bootil probably will scale well with whatever new Super Break support they put in, but still, it feels like there's something wrong with Bootil. Either way, he's like the perfect one-shot unit, so it's not like he needs it, but it feels like the clock is ticking a little bit for him. Next, Castris obviously doesn't need it. Cypher obviously doesn't need it. Lune definitely needs it. The fact that Archer exists makes his kit pretty inexcusable now. His overcapping on energy really hurts him, especially because his best support is now Sunday and not actually Sparkle for some weird reason. It just, yeah, the overcapping feels very bad on him, and for a unit to feel worse with more Eidolons, that's probably not the intention that they wanted to go with. And again, his damage ceiling is not as high as Archer's, and Archer is a free unit, and I would guess to put a wager that Imbiber 2 Lune needs E2 to kind of match that. So I'll put Imbiber 2 Lune at highest priority. Archer is just way too similar that I can't really say that Lune is balanced anymore. Doctor Ratio, pretty similar. Fei Xiao just does his job so much better. As a hyper carry, Fei Xiao doesn't have the restrictions that Doctor Ratio has, and Fei Xiao just does it with a bigger number. Fei Xiao also has much more team options that don't rely on some debuff condition, while Doctor Ratio has a debuff condition and has less reward for fulfilling that condition because of how lower his numbers are. So yeah, he definitely needs a buff. Before Fei Xiao, Doctor Ratio was the best unit because there was no Fei Xiaos, but now that Fei Xiao exists, it feels like he doesn't really have a reason to exist anymore, and because of power creep, it just doesn't work as well. Speaking of which, here's Fei Xiao. Obviously, after I praised her, you think I'm going to put her anywhere else. The only thing that you would say about Fei Xiao that needs to be buffed is there's not enough single target enemies. And if there's a single target enemy, it's gonna come down to either Fei Xiao or Bootil. And yeah, no. She definitely doesn't need buffs, she just needs more single target scenarios to eat up. Next, Firefly. Oh boy. So Firefly is a unit that's very similar to Acheron. Her floor is very high, her ceiling has never been really that high, and Firefly is a very blatant case of a unit being balanced towards their Eidolons. Because at E0, Firefly feels she feels really bad nowadays at E0. At E1, she feels a bit of a reasonable unit, and at E2, she feels balanced to 3.x units. I feel like that was completely by design, that Firefly will start catching up with content if you get more of her Eidolons. But it's gonna run out at some point. At some point, Firefly is gonna be way too... I mean, you can argue that right now. Firefly's E2 costing to feel good is just way too... You can't justify it, basically. And at some point, there really is nowhere else to go for her than to get a rework. Sooner or later, she's gonna get a rework because she has too many issues now to where there's nothing else for her left, really. I mean, like I said with Boot Hill, at least Boot Hill is more flexible, but Firefly's teams are mostly complete now, and all you're doing for her is investing in Eidolons, just like Acheron. So yeah, I think there's sooner or later Firefly has to get buffed, otherwise she probably feels like one of the worst units in the game. Next, Fu Xuan. Fu Xuan definitely needs a buff. I will say this though, I don't think defensively she needs that much of buffs. Because, yeah, sure, Fu Xuan is being very bad against attack inflation, but so is Gallagher. And because of how she's placed as a 50-50 loss character, it's kind of unique of how I'm evaluating her. If I were to take all of that away from Fu Xuan, she needs buffs. She just doesn't have a best-in-slot team, and while you might argue that means she's lacking in teammates, she definitely isn't on the same level as Aventurine with that. She does not have a best-in-slot team whatsoever. Even in teams where she would kind of be the best-in-slot because she has a crit rate buff, huohuo just ends up better. So I think she just needs a buff at this point. Give her personal damage, give her better buffs to where she can actually be a best-in-slot. And yeah, she's back in business, but otherwise she's just here. Next, Fugue. She doesn't need rework. Oh, Japard, I forgot him. I guess I'll put him there. Huohuo. Huohuo doesn't need buffs, and she has more ways to go from Acheron teams, I think. But the main issue with Huohuo now is that her personal damage is so abysmal that even though she provides that extra bit of energy utility, Hyacinth can still outdamage her, which is very weird. She doesn't have as much of a claim to her best-in-slot team as Aventurine, so I think I'm gonna put her in personal kit issues. I think the best way to buff Huohuo is to give her attack buff way more uptime, like make it permanent actually, and actually you can put an 80% attack buff on Huohuo and make it almost permanent, and it wouldn't be imbalanced whatsoever. I think that's all she really needs. Don't buff her energy because that's probably gonna lead to a lot of issues. But just give her a really strong attack buff, and I think she's back in business. Hyacinth doesn't need a buff. Jade is weird. Now, Jade is a unit that's a lot like Argenti, but Jade is a lot better at stuff like Flame Reaver and has a lot more situations than Argenti. Basically, when any fight has like 5 targets, Jade would usually be the best for it. So I don't think she needs lacking in teammates. I don't think that's true. I think I'll put her in doesn't need reworks. Because, to be honest, she scales well with other Erudition units too. Like, she scaled well with Herta, to be honest. Next is jiaoqiu. Give him sustain or bench this unit forever. I think... Is it fair to put him at the highest priority? Because I think he's also justifiably here. I don't think he's that brick, to be honest. Because if you gave jiaoqiu sustain powers, then she will be... jiaoqiu will be Acheron's best in slot once again, because she can finally use Harmony units. So I think he has the potential to be incredibly good. If you made this guy a healer, he would be very good. Like, he would be like S tier next to Cypher. But as of now, I think that in a few patches or so, we're gonna have to see that jiaoqiu buff. Well... Okay, I'll concede. I think he's highest priority after thinking about it. Next is Jing Yuan. So Jing Yuan gets buffed every patch by Hoyoverse. And because of that, he is in the highest priority because he gets buffed every patch. But okay, you know what? Let's just make a new tier for this guy. Yeah, I think this is a very good tier for him, to be honest. Next is Jing Liu. Well, she got buffed, so... Kafka, she got buffed. Hyacinth, I mean, again, like I said with Aventurine, Lingsha is one of the only characters in the game that can actually outdamage Hyacinth in her specific Super Break team, so she clearly doesn't need buffs as of now. If anything, Super Break needs buffs before Lingsha does. Luochs needs buffs, just like Fu Xuan, I think. Luochs at least has Maidimos as a claim to fame, because Maidi actually wants very high raw healing and Luochs is the best at that. But I feel like that's not enough. Luocha needs some sort of like defense shred in his base kit, maybe res shred in his base kit, maybe something else, you know, like personal damage, whichever. It feels like his value is very much on Fushuan's level, just a tiny bit higher. Not enough in my opinion to make him like nowhere else to go, but yeah, I think he's in the highest priority. He needs buffs right now. Next, Mighty, obviously not. Finon, obviously not. Rappa, same tier as Boothil, to be honest. Yeah, I think that's fair. Robin, obviously not. Ronmei, obviously not. Zil, obviously highest priority. Do I even need to explain why? You know what? I'm not gonna open that can of worms. Just leave it at that. Silver Wolf just got buffed. Doesn't need it. Sparkle is the most appropriate way I can say is lacking teammates. If Imbiber Lune got buffed, Sparkle would not be here, to be honest. If there was a more archers in the game, Sparkle would not be here. It's not her kit's fault that there's not a lot of SP consuming characters that are actually meta in this game, so I'll just put her here and let's move on. Next is Sunday, obviously not. The Herta, obviously not. Topaz was run out of a job by Cypher, and it was basically the only reason for her to ever exist. And now that Cypher exists, I didn't know. Topaz doesn't have anywhere else to go, and definitely needs the buff for her to reclaim back her follow-up attack team to a generic debuffer. It's kind of embarrassing, to be honest. Tribi, well, no, doesn't need reworks. And lastly, Yun Li. This is actually a pretty tricky one. So, Yun Li is lacking a counter support. I think that's pretty much the only thing left. If Yun Li had a specific counter support, then she would be a much better unit. However, I think her kit you can parse this as a personal kit issue too, because counters are just not favored that well in this game. A support can fix that, but yeah. I'm gonna put her next to Huohuo because I feel like putting her a tier higher than Huohuo essentially is gonna make it is too flattering. I'm gonna put her next to Huohuo. She has personal kit issues that would be solved by a support working with counter units. And yeah, I think this is a pretty fair tier list. I did this on stream and I felt like I had a bit of miscues in terms of my explanations. So with this cleaned up version, I hope it's more coherent and I hope it's more high quality and satisfactory than a stream clip, which is made like out of the moment. So yeah, those are my opinions on which units need to get buffed and which units don't need to get buffed. Hope you guys like this video. Like, comment, subscribe, do the algorithm stuff. And I will see you later. Bye-bye.